The night my daughter-in-law called me dead weight. She did it with a mouthful of strawberry cake, smiling at the guests as if she were complimenting the frosting. We were gathered for my granddaughter's 17th birthday, candles still smoking, everyone clapping. I had just set down the knife when Lila leaned in close enough that only I could hear and said, "You can't keep up anymore, Maggie. It's time to be practical." The words cut in a place I don't show. I wiped my hands on a paper towel, looked at my son, and he pretended not to see. That was the worst part. Not the insult. The pretending. I'm 68, a widow, the kind of woman people assume moves slowly, but I spent decades as a school secretary keeping a middle school from falling apart, so I know how to read schedules and people. After my husband died of a quiet heart attack, I kept the house in our small New Jersey shore town, paid the taxes from my savings, and grew tomatoes in planters by the porch. I babysat when asked. I shopped sales and used the senior discount days. My invisible work, watching for school half-days, calling to remind birthdays, showing up with bandages and soup, just became background music. When it stops, that is when people notice, but by then the house is colder. Seeds of all this were already planted. A month before, a woman from church began stopping by with pastries and questions. Ruth. Nice scarves, soft perfume, the kind who lives off being useful. She offered rides, then insisted on helping me sort papers just in case. She owned a notary stamp and was proud of it. She said it was a ministry. I let her staple my electric bills. She gently put aside anything that looked too complex for now. When she left, I would unfold the stacks again and check them twice, and every time one document would be missing and then reappear in another folder. It made me feel muddled, and I hate feeling muddled. That night after the cake, I carried trash out to the townhouse complex's bin behind the building. The winter air had that sting that wakes you up. On top of the bag of wrapping paper in the can was a crumpled receipt from a courier company I didn't recognize, paid by Lila, with a note, "Deliver notarized originals to Attorney P." And my address written in shaky block letters. I smoothed it out with my fingers. The courier fee was odd, $73.15, a number that lodged in my head the way numbers do. I tucked it into the pocket of my cardigan. On the way back inside, our building concierge, Luis, stepped out from the desk and lowered his voice the way people do when they see something they're not sure is their business. "Ms. Doyle, I didn't want to interfere, but..." He tapped the counter. "If you ever want to see who's been signing for your packages in the afternoons, we have the camera now. The board had installed it last month. Sometimes those labels are telling." I looked at his neat hair and careful eyes. Quiet men like him run whole buildings. My stomach tightened, but I kept my voice friendly. "Maybe tomorrow, Luis. Let's pretend tonight is just cake." And I walked back into the party holding my own secret, not sure yet whether it was a crumb or a trail. Small humiliations do not arrive like hail, they arrive as favors. The next morning, Lila brought me a latte with a lid labeled Mom, and a smile that said she forgave me for existing. She was in her work blazer, hair sharp, an executive at a salon chain that had somehow made retail a personality. She set the drink on my table without asking how I take it, too sweet, and unfolded a printed checklist she claimed was from a care consultant. "Just to reduce stress for everyone, Maggie. We can put your monthly bills on autopilot. There's a form for household management, and one for medical decision-making, very standard. We will move you into our spare room for a while. It's safer. Near the family." She slid a pen across the table. Her nails were perfect. I looked at the headers. Durable power of attorney. Advance medical directive. Care contract. The care contract had a section that looked like fees, with blanks under compensation and room and board, which seemed odd, and then a line that said gift to caregiver in recognition of services. My hand shook, but not from age. From the calculation of being made neat. "Lila, I have been paying my own bills for 45 years. That's not the problem." She touched my forearm as if brushing crumbs and tilted her head. "Don't make this emotional. It's practical." At the supermarket later, a neighbor approached me near the freezer aisle and spoke too loudly. Word travels in buildings faster than in towns. Laundry room gossip is an engine. People asked if I was moving in with Tom and Lila. Someone else said I was lucky. Someone else said, well, not everyone gets this kind of support. I laughed and nodded. My face was hot. Being a burden is not a fact. It's a threat people hold over you to make you smaller in your own home. The rule of the world, as I came to think of it, appeared a week later in real terms. A letter from my bank informed me that my online access password had been changed and a new two-factor device was registered. Per your phone call. I had made no call. I dialed the number on the back of my card and went through the security questions. The woman on the line was patient and told me there had been an attempt to add an external transfer account in the name of Care Services LLC, and that a small test deposit had failed because the name did not match. She recommended I come in. That night at a family dinner, Lila announced, almost as an aside, that she had found a wonderful estate attorney who could simplify everything, especially for women in your stage. People nodded. Tom chewed silently, eyes on his plate, and when our granddaughter asked me if I'd keep my garden boxes at the new house, Lila answered for me, "We'll see, honey." The phrase made me feel like a suitcase. At the end of the evening, a courier arrived with a manila envelope addressed to me. Inside was a gift deed, transferring my house to Tom for natural love and affection, with me retaining a right to reside. It was pre-filled with my name and theirs. The notary block had Ruth's name already stamped on a blank line. "We can handle the taxes," Lila said. "It's smarter for probate. You don't want a court involved, do you? So much paperwork." In the elevator up to my apartment, I stood next to Luis. He pressed the 8th floor for me without being asked. "I set aside a copy of the package room log, Ms. Doyle," he said without looking at me. "Sometimes a thing is only a thing until it's a pattern." The doors opened. On my kitchen counter, I placed the deed next to my electric kettle and felt the whole world tilt quiet. I did not sleep much after that. The ticking of my kitchen clock sounded like a pencil on a grade book. At 2 in the morning I made tea and laid out everything on the table as if I were preparing a lesson plan. The bank letter, the courier receipt from the party, the care contract, the gift deed, the list of to-dos Lila had printed, my property tax notice, and the stapled stack Ruth had organized. Somewhere in those pages was a hand trying to draw me into a smaller circle. By dawn I had a plan, the kind of plan that looks like surrender but isn't. First, I called the bank and asked to schedule an appointment with the branch manager. The woman who met me, Nina, was younger than my daughter would have been if I had had a daughter, with a calm voice that made me feel like I still had time to fix things. "We can put a hard note on your account requiring in-person authentication for any changes," Nina said. "Also, we can print a login activity report and an IP log for the days in question. It's not typical to share, but you can make a formal request, and I can read you enough to know whether it's yours." She read the numbers aloud. The last login had originated from an IP associated with the salon's Wi-Fi downtown. I did not say anything. I asked her to open a new savings account titled Pay on Death to Anna Doyle, my granddaughter, with no online access and statements suppressed. I deposited my emergency cash and the balance of a CD that had just matured. It felt like slipping a biscuit into a pocket before the picnic starts. Next, I walked into a small law office above the pharmacy where the fluorescent bulbs hum. The name on the door was Priya Narang, attorney at law. She was about my granddaughter's math teacher's age, simple sweater, steady eyes. I told her everything like a confession. The latte, the care contract, the letter from the bank, the gift deed, the lobby camera offers I hadn't taken yet. I told her my worst fear, which wasn't losing the house. It was moving in with people who considered me cargo. Priya listened without interrupting. She said in New Jersey a gift of a house can have tax implications and 5-year lookbacks for Medicaid eligibility. But more importantly, it strips me of control unless carefully drafted with a retained life estate or trust terms that protect me. She explained powers of attorney and how broad they can be. She said I could create a revocable trust and fund it with the house, with me as trustee, and name a successor I could trust, and put in very clear no contest and care obligations clauses. She said, "You are not a burden. You are a grantor." Also, she added, if someone is using your notary without you present, that's not only improper, it's a crime. I asked if we could do it quickly and quietly. "If you're willing to move pieces fast, we can. But the truth will have to be public at some point." I surprised her then. "I want to move in with them. For a little while. If I'm a burden, I want to be the exact kind that puts everything into the record." She considered me for a long moment and then smiled in a way I recognized from my own mirror, the smile of someone who used to underestimate herself and stopped. "We'll draft a temporary care agreement," she said, her fingers already moving on the keys. that states they owe you a specific standard of care, and that any compensation is deferred unless certain conditions are met. While you are there, we will install certified mail notices of revocation for any documents you don't sign in my office, and we will record your declaration with the county clerk to block transfers for 30 days unless you confirm in person. And we will bring Luis into this if he's willing. That afternoon, in the dim back room behind Luis's desk where the lost umbrellas live, we watched the camera footage. The day my password changed, Lila appeared in the lobby with documents for Ms. Doyle and signed M. Doyle with the dot on the M like she always dots her I's. 2 days later, Ruth signed in holding a box of pastries and left with a manila folder under her shawl. On the day of the party, a courier handed off an envelope to Tom. He barely glanced at it and set it on the stroller under the coat tree. You can have a copy of this footage, Ms. Doyle, Luis said. The board keeps 30 days recorded. You'll want it before they overwrite. Luis, why are you helping me? He looked out past the glass to the mailboxes. My mother lives in Peru. I'm the wire, not the wall, Ms. Doyle. That's what sons are supposed to be. We burned the clip to a little drive and put it in a tea tin. At home, I slid the tin into the back of the flour canister. Later, I would laugh at how many secrets women store with baking supplies, but not then. Moving in with Tom and Lila for safety was the best acting I've ever done. I packed my toiletries in my pillbox and a sweater. Lila made a show of clearing a dresser drawer. The spare room smelled like ironing spray. They installed a baby camera on a shelf and said it was for my safety, and I thanked them. I cooked small dinners, washed my cup, and asked kind, simple questions. People give you more when they think you're giving up. In the second week, while Lila shouted into her headset about inventory, I overheard her talking to someone named P. about bundling the deed now before the account is locked down. She said, we have a notary. She's a saint. She said, the old woman likes being asked. That night I couldn't sleep. I went to the kitchen and made tea. When I returned, the folder I had been keeping under the mattress with my new trust documents, the ones Priya had given me to review, was gone. I stood in the doorway, heart thudding, the baby camera's little red light watching me. In the morning at breakfast, Tom put a hand on my shoulder and called me Mom in a croaky voice he uses when he's trying not to cry, and Lila set down an omelet already cut in half. Let's sign everything this Saturday, okay? Lila said lightly, like it was a brunch date. I smiled back and reached for my tea as if nothing in my life had just been moved. Saturday came like a stage cue. They had arranged a family brunch at the same restaurant where we had celebrated birthdays, and told me a notary would stop by the table for convenience. The room had a back area used for events with a wall of mirrors that make people look at themselves while they talk. My granddaughter Anna helped me with my coat and whispered, "Are you okay?" I squeezed her hand and said, "Watch closely today. Sometimes the truth shows you its handwriting." The notary was Ruth in a coral scarf, her stamp peeking out of her handbag like a pet. She laid out forms on the white tablecloth with manicured pride. There was the durable power of attorney naming Tom and Lila jointly, with a clause allowing each to act independently. There was the gift deed again, now reprinted with the date and blanks for my signature. There was an affidavit of capacity, which made me bark a laugh I covered with a cough. Ruth gave me a soft smile. "Maggie dear, this is just to prevent any challenges later. Think of it as smoothing the road for your heirs." The waiter brought coffee. The room buzzed with other families, and an older couple clinked mimosas while a toddler whined near the door. I asked if we could wait for Anna to sit with us. Lila rolled her eyes, then corrected her face. Tom looked pale. When everyone was settled, my sister Joan and her husband Ted had also arrived, summoned by Lila for witnesses. I lifted my purse onto my lap, took out a folder, and placed it on the table. It was the folder that had disappeared from under the mattress, only it wasn't. It was a copy, prepared by Priya, with a cover letter addressed to interested parties. Lila's jaw moved sideways for a second when she saw the stamp in the corner. Filed County Clerk, 2 days ago. "Before we start," I said, and my voice carried without effort because I was used to calling children after recess, "I need to read a notice. Under state law, any deed or power of attorney I sign must be free of coercion and based on informed consent. As of Thursday, I created the Doyle Living Trust with me as trustee. The house belongs to the trust, not to me personally, and cannot be transferred today. I have also revoked any prior powers of attorney not executed in the presence of my counsel. I handed copies of a notarized revocation to Ruth. Her hand trembled and the stamp rattled on the china. Lila laughed. It wasn't a real laugh. You're confused, Maggie. That's not how any of this works. I gestured to the back of the room. Priya stepped forward from a corner table where she had been sitting with a cup of tea, unnoticed. She introduced herself and placed her card next to the stack. Then I nodded to Luis, who I had invited on the pretext of thanking him for keeping packages safe. He took a small projector from his backpack, and the waiter dimmed the lights out of curiosity more than instruction. This won't take long, I said. On the screen, one of those pull-down things restaurants use for sports games, appeared the lobby footage. Lila receiving a package for Ms. Doyle, and signing my name with a dot. Ruth leaving with a manila folder she hadn't carried in. A courier handing Tom an envelope at the party. The room's chatter shifted to a hush that had weight. Ted muttered, "Jesus," under his breath, and Joan held his forearm. Next, Nina's letter, which she had written on bank letterhead at Priya's request, read aloud in a calm voice. Someone had tried to attach Care Services LLC to my account and had initiated a password reset from a salon's IP address. At the word salon, Lila's face changed. You could see the mistake slide into place. I placed the courier receipt I'd found in the trash next to her plate and tapped the $73.15. This is the small inconsistency that taught me there was a larger plan. It wasn't the amount. It was the fact that it matched the charge on my bank's suspicious activity report. Numbers talk to each other, I said. Ruth tried to stand. Priya asked her without heat to remain. Then I took a breath because this part mattered. I looked at Tom, my boy with the cowlick I used to lick my finger to smooth before school, and I said, "Son, you can stop this now by telling the truth. Did you know about this?" He closed his eyes. Lila said it had to be simple. That the trust would complicate taxes. I thought we could reverse anything later if you didn't like it, he said, small. I could see the boy and the man trying to meet in his face. It would have been enough, that exposure, but I had promised myself I would not just reveal. I would restore the balance. I nodded to the last piece. Louise stepped to the side, and a young woman who had been sitting near the bar, pretending to scroll her phone, came forward. It was Beth, the accountant at the salon where Lila worked, the one who always avoided eye contact in the hallway when our appointments overlapped. She had reached out after hearing me ask Brenda, the receptionist, about the Wi-Fi password and seeing my hands shake with anger. She had nothing to gain by helping me. She could lose her job. She placed a printed email thread on the table. It was between Lila and P, the attorney, discussing moving the house first, and a line that made the room wince. Her confusion helps us. Also attached was a reimbursed expense voucher to Ruth's son for courier services. Same $73.15, paid from the salon's petty cash with Lila's approval. Beth looked at the floor. "It's wrong," she said simply. I couldn't watch it. Silence filled the room in a way that made people's chairs creak. Lila opened her mouth and then closed it. Ruth reached for water and spilled it into her lap. Priya gathered the forms Ruth had brought and slid them back into her tote, then placed a cease and desist letter in their place. Any further attempts to transfer Ms. Doyle's property or exercise power over her accounts will result in civil and criminal proceedings, Priya said. We recommend you seek your own counsel. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then Anna stood and walked around the table to my chair. She put both hands on my shoulders and said to the room in a clear voice, "Grandma is not a problem to solve. She is the person who taught me to read my first library card. If anyone treats her like paperwork again, I'm out." Tom looked at me and then at his wife. His mouth open like he might split into two. He placed his napkin on the table like a surrender flag. "Mom, I'm sorry," he said, and for the first time in months, I believed him. The consequences didn't arrive like lightning. They arrived in stamped envelopes and scheduled calls. Priya filed a petition for a temporary restraining order against any interference with my property. The Notary Commission reported Ruth for misconduct. She accepted a voluntary suspension rather than face a hearing. P, the attorney, sent an email suggesting miscommunication and withdrew from representing Lila after Priya forwarded the footage and the expense voucher. The salon restructured, which meant Lila lost the power she used like a blade and was reassigned off the corporate track. Beth kept her job because she had documented that she raised concerns early and didn't process transactions she knew were wrong. I baked her a lemon cake and wrote a thank you note in my old-fashioned cursive. At home, I replaced the lock and asked Louise to be the second contact on my building directory. I installed a small camera pointed at my porch and put a ceramic owl in the window because it made me laugh to think of a fake watcher watching. The trust stayed in place. I changed my will to include a clause that gifts could be reduced by the cost of any care I chose to buy for myself. I asked Anna to be my successor trustee when she turned 21, and Priya agreed to serve in the interim. I made a modest donation to the school library in my husband's name and set aside a little monthly stipend to pay Louise for consulting, which he tried to refuse until I reminded him he had saved me more than I could count by simply noticing. Tom came by one afternoon with flowers from the supermarket, the kind with too much baby's breath, and asked if he could help in ways I chose, not the ways Lila had demanded. I said yes, but I also said there will be rules. He nodded. We set up a shared calendar on his phone with my doctor appointments and my grocery ride days. He called on Tuesdays even when there was nothing to say, and learned how to sit in quiet without fixing. As for Lila, she sent a letter with careful ifs and maybes and misunderstandings. I sat at my table and read each word, and then I let the letter sit overnight the way you let bread rise to see what it wants to be. In the morning, I wrote back that I would not be coming to their house for the holidays this year. I would host a smaller dinner in my apartment with simple food, and anyone could come who could say with their whole chest that my choices were mine. I did not punish her with silence. I punished her with boundaries. People in the building nodded at me differently now, not out of pity but out of recognition. At the next HOA meeting, when a young man tried to bulldoze a vote to cut the concierge hours to save money, I cleared my throat and said, "The person at that desk is not a cost. He is a memory we share." The motion failed. After the meeting, Luis pretended to fix a sign so he could hide the way his eyes watered. I did one more thing that surprised even me. I took a part-time shift at the library's front desk 2 afternoons a week, cataloging returns and stapling summer reading lists for kids with sticky fingers. It's work you can hold in your hands, the kind that goes home with you only as a gentle weight, like a book you can finish and return. If you ask me what I learned, I won't give you a slogan. I'll tell you this: when they try to shrink you with words like burden, try being exactly that for a minute, in a way that requires a receipt. Move in, listen, fill their house with your quiet, and while you do, keep your lawyer's number on speed dial and your documents filed where Flower lives. People show themselves under the pressure of their own plans, and when the day comes to pull the tablecloth off without breaking the dishes, do it with a steady hand and an audience. Sometimes I stand at my window at dusk, watching the porch light turn the railing yellow, and I think about the morning I told Priya I wanted to move in and become the problem. That choice felt like betrayal of myself, but it was the opening that allowed me to draw the lines exactly where they should have been all along. The image that stays with me is Anna's hands on my shoulders at the restaurant, firm and warm, holding me in the place where mothers hold their children when the world pushes hard. I ask myself sometimes what would have happened if I had signed without reading. Then I go water the tomatoes and answer, not this. If you ever find yourself offered help that feels like a leash, remember how numbers talk to each other, how cameras remember, how a good banker whispers and a good lawyer lets you be the hero of your own file. And remember that in any room where someone expects you to be grateful for losing yourself, there are always other eyes, waiting for the cue to stand with you when you step into your name.